Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at the Power Stance Guardian Swordspears again, and we're going to be taking a closer look at kind of the high damage associated with Power Stance jumping attacks. In patch 1.09, those were debuffed a bit, and it said the jumping attack power for Power Stance weapons was lowered, but we're going to be taking a closer look at whether or not that feels relevant and just the potential buff stacking that's still available when it comes to jumping attacks. The buff stacking that we'll be employing here is going to involve pretty much every type of buff, so weapon buff, aura buff, body buff, and we're going to be using the dexterity build that we used in the previous video, so this is just going to be plain dexterity. What we'll have is Raptor's Black Feathers, we'll also have the Claw Talisman, we'll also have the Ritual Sword Talisman, and then we'll be using Flame Grant Me Strength, along with 2 Ash of Wars that will boost the AR for our weapons, so Braggart's Roar as well as Cragblade. For testing purposes, we'll take off pretty much all that, look at the damage we do to some PvE, and then we'll also put that all back on and see how much damage we do when we're fully buffed. So let's go ahead and just remove the Claw Talisman, Raptor's Black Feathers, and not use any of our buffs, and just go ahead and go for a jumping L1 on this PvE here. So we'll see 1552, not so bad. Alright, so now we're going to start using the buff stack version. So we'll use Flame Grant Me Strength and then immediately switch our talismans over to the Ritual Sword Talisman and then go for the buff with Braggart's Roar, and then we'll switch our main hand weapon over to Cragblade, go ahead and buff like that. And now we'll be ready to go ahead and jump in here. We've got over 1000 AR on our main hand weapon, and with that we hit over 2900. While you can absolutely run this type of buff stacking at the beginning of each invasion, I'm going to be opting to not really employ all these. I'll mostly just be using the Claw Talisman and jumping attacks occasionally, but it's worth understanding that this type of buff stacking is available. It's extremely strong in PvE, and it's going to be very strong in PvP too. So we'll take a look at the invasions as well as the duels, and if you have any questions, as always, let me know. If you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I'd appreciate it, and let's go ahead and see how these perform. Alright, so jumping into our first invasion, we have the quintessential first step trio, and this is going to involve pretty much all the major weapons that we see here at the first step. So we do have some light roll, we have multiple katanas, so that's going to include Hand of Melania as well as Moonveil as well as Rivers of Blood, and then we also have another phantom that's running the dual curve sword, so a very strong pressuring tool there. And we're going to be trying to utilize some of our consumables to give ourselves openings that we might not normally have. Using stuff like Spark Aromatic as well as Gravity Stone Fan can be very helpful. If you get the Poise Break, it can very easily lead into a jumping attack that can do immense damage. So here we do see a jumping attack do over 1000 damage. Obviously that player wasn't really wearing armor, so it's not insane, but we do switch over to the Claw Talisman. So we didn't have that on originally, and that will be significant here as we begin to pressure the player with dual curved swords. So everyone is being extremely aggressive, and really the stone fans are giving us great opportunities. Here we catch the poise break that we were hoping for on the player with the curved swords, and then combo that into a jumping attack. And then they don't heal, and that allows us to grab another jumping attack. Now, while we did get that player out of the world, we do end up getting hit with a Hand of Melania attack with this player running the katana setup, and they can do a ton of damage with that. We can see that we almost die there, but we are able to escape, and now we start using some FP pots or sleep pots. So if they do get slept, it'll give us an opportunity to both land another jumping attack and it will reduce their FP. So that can be extremely helpful in invasions where you have people going for a lot of L2s, and it will really make your life easier if they run out of FP. So at this point, we do change our strategy. Since we're playing against 2 players that are light rolling, the Guardian Swordspear is not going to be kind of the right tool for the job, and we're also playing against players that have very low poise. So both a heavy thrusting sword as well as just a regular thrusting sword are going to be great options, and we can poise break almost every single time with both those weapons. So the thrusting sword, that's not too much of a surprise, but the heavy thrusting sword, it's not too much of a surprise, but with the thrusting sword, that's extremely powerful. And we also will note that we just got a co-invader come into the world, so that's going to help, you know, make our lives a little bit easier. We're not going to rush in, we're going to be kind of patient because we're low on health, and we do switch over to the thrusting sword, and that's going to be really strong for chase downs. We also have Bloodhound Step on this, so if we really need to get out in a crunch, we can. And our co-invader does a bunch of damage to the other phantom here, and we're able to just get the last hit with the thrusting sword. We kind of acknowledge their setup and laud them for kind of the work they're doing here at the first step, and we do see a disconnect from the host. So, you know, kind of checks all the boxes that we would expect for a first step invasion. And moving on to our next invasion, we have a duo here in the Ancestral Woods, and we also see some Elden Stars coming our way. So that's probably one of the most annoying incantations to play against, partially just because it gives you like little poise damage and makes your controller vibrate consistently if you're in the vicinity of Elden Stars, and it just doesn't stop for a very long period of time. So just mostly annoying and not even that good. So what we're trying to do initially is just get Elden Stars to hit the giant tree and stop following us, which we do successfully do. And we do throw in a couple cheeky parries, so I like to, you know, incorporate that now and again. It can be a nice way to both practice your parry timing, and if you do land the parry, you'll be doing significant damage. So the Phantom here does provide an opening for a jumping attack, but manages to roll it just in time. And we do switch over to the main hand shield, kind of setting up for a parry. We get hit a couple times just trying to get the roll timing down with this opponent, but we, in that moment, kind of learn their attack pattern and are able to get the parry. We do get hit with Elden Stars again, and we switch back to our parry shield because there might be the opportunity here, and we do manage to get the parry on the Phantom as well. However, they do kind of disconnect from the world at this point, so we don't get the damage. But just kind of a nice 2v1 against some players using some fairly obnoxious strategies, at least one of them. So moving on, we have our third invasion against a trio here, and this definitely just kind of screamed gank. Like when you go up a ladder, you feel like, you know, there's probably a group waiting for you. So we're trying to get some initial damage on the player with the Crozier Hammer, and in comes the Rot Breath. So we're trying to be kind of conscientious of that, not take too much damage, and not get stunned in the process. That would leave us open to some high damage hits from the Crozier Hammer. And here we do switch over to the Great Bow. We get the shot off that knocks the wizard down. However, I thought they fell off the ledge. No such luck. They did kind of stay in the general vicinity. So we begin pressuring. I go for a running L1, which can be a nice mix-up if they're expecting just a running light attack, which comes out as a very fast poke. And we do kind of have to back off a little bit. Here we go for kind of a quick turn and burn with that running poke, and we get the Crozier Hammer player into a very low health spot, but not quite enough. So we do kind of need to continue to dance around these incoming spells and just look for the right opening. Eventually we do kind of get that opening and really do need to back off. And here comes the Rot Breath, and if we take a step forward, we do get hit by it, but just being like inches away from the back area, we're okay. So here we land the jumping attack. It does 1,000 damage on both players. I thought I had the host there too, but it turns out they had like 46 health left. So we do get like a running light attack and come out with the W in that one too. So, you know, without the buff stacking, we can just see the power of the jumping L1s with this particular weapon. It's really just using the Claw Talisman, and we can kind of understand just from that intro how strong it would be with additional buff stacking in PvE. You can see at least like a 1.5 times damage. You know, you might even be hitting 2k on players. So very strong setup potentially, and it doesn't take much to get a lot of damage out. And in this next invasion, we very quickly perform a vigor check on both, well, really all the players with the Stormhawk Axe, which is a very nice swap when you're in an area with no PvE and not much room to navigate. And here we kind of back off. We are down to just the host here, and we go for Piercing Fang, which I think was a nice mix-up, kind of anticipating them rolling away after usage of the flask. And here we get a nice neutral attack followed up by a running light attack, and those two deliver enough damage to kind of complete that invasion with a W. So next up we do have another 3v1, and Elden Stars is going to make another appearance. We have a wizard type player here with some regen. They have the Icon Shield, and we start pressuring them backwards. They're a little bit unfamiliar with the level, it seems, so they end up rolling off the cliff, and we take our time and roll kind of the right direction onto the area below, which has some PvE, which is nice. And we're also trying to be conscientious of the incoming damage of Elden Stars. You really want to kind of just tank the little projectiles, and then roll the big projectile, the most damage comes from the giant projectile, and the little projectiles do very little damage. So here we were hoping to interrupt the casting of Elden Stars again with the Great Bow. However, we do get hit by quite a few of the little projectiles, but we line up that branch there so that the big projectile does go into the branch rather than into us. So at this point, we switch away from the Great Bow, and we're looking to get some Frost procs, but it's not super necessary. Again, a Frost proc will be greatly enhancing your jumping attack damage since you'll be lowering their physical damage negation, so something to consider there. And here we kind of just go for some neutral attacks. We're doing a little bit more damage with our weapon, but they are using a shield to block a few of their attacks. So we do switch over to the Piercing Fang Ash of War. I figured it might be a nice option since they were blocking, and that particular Ash of War does go through shields. And we do see the Power Stance Straight Spears coming out from the Elden Stars player. So we're also seeing quite a bit of lag, but we do get just one jumping light attack hit for over 900, applaud the use of Elden Stars, and again come out with the W. So a nice moment there, and just kind of a good victory against some cheeky players. Now, moving on, we have what starts as a 2v1. We go for what was hoping to be a 360 quickscope. We'll definitely be working on that, you know, as I progress as a player. I think it's important to kind of raise the skill ceiling with how you play, and 360 quickscopes are a very important element of that. So we do need to kind of navigate some of the madness buildup. We do get hit with Vike Spear a few times, and we also see a blue get summoned into the world. So it's now a 3v1. We'll be going for some of those jumping attacks for sure, and seeing if we can get that burst damage that will be so helpful. And it's one thing to note about the jumping attacks is that they do have kind of weird hitboxes on the Power Stance Guardian Swordspears, where it's very easy to hit with only one of the blades rather than both. You really have to be lined up quite well, and if your opponent is off to the left or the right, it's very easy to just kind of clip them with one of the blades and not get the damage from both. So if you do see lower damage than you're expecting, then that may be the reason for it. If everything's lined up, especially if you go for the attack early in the jump, it's more likely to kind of miss a little bit. So going for a later attack has the potential to kind of help you out there. And we also are getting hit with Spectral Lance, which is just not something you see that much, but it is a good pressuring tool. The tracking on it is quite good. But with the swap over to the Heavy Thrusting Sword and Stormblade, we're able to dispatch of the blue that comes into the world. So now we switch back to the Power Stance Swordspears, and we dodge some of the incoming pokes with Vike Spear just pretty nicely with the kind of animation that our body's in after a jumping attack. We do see the parry attempts from the Phantom, which is honestly a very bold move. I mean, I know it's a 2v1, but I'm going for jumping attacks which can't be parried, and the timing is very much like kind of go for the parry and just pray type thing. It's not super calculated is how it feels. So we're continuing to pressure the Phantom, and here we do see the Sleep Bolts coming in. So that's going to be a bit of an issue. Fortunately, we did switch our Talisman over to one with raised focus because we saw Madness was in the mix, and focus is also going to be the stat that prohibits you from getting, you know, procced by sleep early on. So that's very helpful to have already kind of on deck. And here we use the Stone Fan and almost combo it into the jumping attack. No such luck, but really the Gravity Stone Fans are such a strong consumable. I can't believe it took me this long to incorporate them into my invasions, and you'll definitely be seeing more of those from me. I've started to really enjoy them, as well as the Spark Aromatic. So, you know, not so much needed for the damage, but it is great for crowd control. And here we kind of combo our running light attack into a delayed Piercing Fang, and we do get the roll catch. The extra range with Piercing Fang is phenomenal, and I found it to be such a nice Ash of War to have on this build. So it's not going to be as conducive for the jumping attack buff stacking that we talked about at the beginning, but just for the variety and the moveset mix-up, I found it to be very, very strong. So we're going for a lot of running light attacks. If you know the player isn't really prepared for it, it can be a great option. We also switch over to a shield because why not? We get hit with the Winged Scythe Ash of War, and our opponent is pretty low on health, and we decide to, you know, use a Bolus. We don't want to get bled and die while we can't heal, and we decide it's prudent to switch back over to the dual Guardian Swordspear moveset. And we get that running light attack, we back off a little bit, don't get hit by the Ash of War, and we do get another hit in there. Now that we can heal again, we can be a little bit more aggressive, and we do get the ravioli step finish. So a nice invasion there, and we come out with the W. Moving on, we're going to be utilizing the Rain of Arrows, Ash of War, and be buff stacking a little bit with our talismans. So we'll have one that increases the damage associated with bolts, and then we also have Shard of Alexander on. And if you have the time to set up for something like this, it could be extremely useful to just at least one-shot one Phantom, get a nice Vigor check on a player with low HP, and, you know, turn that 3v1 into a 2v1. So here we can switch away from our talismans that were set up to kind of help with that initial burst of damage and begin kind of attacking this setup that feels very much like a gank. So blood loss is very much in the mix. We're seeing a Twin Blade player which can deliver quite a lot of blood loss build up very quickly, and then we also see Eleanor's Pole Blade, which does, you know, pretty much the same thing. So the name of the game is to not really get caught in too many attacks, and if we do kind of get caught into attacks early on, to back off very quickly. You don't want to allow your opponents to kind of continue to spam their attack, because oftentimes they'll gain priority with the Twin Blade, and then everything will just kind of keep building. They'll get the blood loss proc, which will put you in a stun lock, and the fact that there are two of them as well does make it very difficult. So we switch over to the power stanced sword spears again, and are really just looking to potentially get a jumping attack. Having one with Piercing Fang wouldn't have been a bad option since this player is using shield, but they start panic rolling and we're able to get a couple hits in very quickly. And now we get a kind of a cheeky sleep pod out here. The Eleanor's Pole Blade Ash of War is very long, which means that they're going to stay in that sleep AoE for quite a while, and that combos very nicely into a jumping L1. And that can be a kind of great setup. If you think you can get your opponent slept, then that's going to be pretty solid. So this last invasion was mostly just kind of a funny one where one player jumps off the edge, the other one's AFK, and we very quickly catch up to the host. So this player is using dual curve swords, which are very susceptible to parries. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that we don't get the blood loss proc, switch over to the main hand shield as they come in for a running light attack, and we do switch over to the Misericord, get the swap, and then have a very weird animation moment, but we still come out with the W despite the fact that they kind of glitched away. So very interesting things happening in Elden Ring. It's definitely the game of the year. So moving on, we have the dual portion of the showcase. This first player is going to be a very strong Gugs player, so you don't see Gugs too much in the arena, and when you do, it can be kind of scary just because if they're able to get the damage off associated with their hits, it's only going to take like 3, maybe 4 hits to kill you. So you have to be very deliberate with your movement and very kind of patient, because you can react to pretty much everything they do, and as soon as you start panicking, they'll frequently be in a good spot to, you know, really pressure you and hit you with very high damage attacks. The wave dashing potential on this is very strong. The crouch poke comes out still pretty fast, even though that was nerfed in a patch. And, you know, here we can see the patience is not happening, and we do get a jumping light attack. So a jumping neutral against a Gugs player can be very strong, and we're able to combo that nicely into a Piercing Fang roll catch, which is a very strong setup. I think the amount of damage that comes with a jumping light attack, or a jumping L1 that is going to kind of strike fear into the heart of your opponent, and that's going to force them to roll, and you can very easily, you know, set up your Piercing Fang as a roll catch, and it will pretty much always have the range needed to catch up with them and just deliver a ton of damage between those two different hits. So next up we have a player with a Zweihander, and they're using Royal Knight's Resolve as well as the potential for an offhand Clean Rot Night Sword, so a lot of combo potential there, and they're very good with kind of their spacing and their discipline, but we are able to use kind of a surprise running L1 and catch them on the backswing. So a very useful option there that takes up quite a lot of space, and one that I don't really recommend throwing out all the time, but if you go for it occasionally, it can be very strong. So here we have a player that's using just a single lance. That's a moveset that I really enjoy using myself and then just playing with personally. I think a single lance can be very strong. We also see Flaming Strike, and we are running over 100 poise, which means we don't get stunned by it, and that's going to be very important. One Flaming Strike followed up by the combo can do so much damage. Here we do get the jump jumping attack. We set up for the Piercing Fang, but they do a great job of punishing it with a jumping attack of their own. But we are able to kind of continue the pressure and land the final hits necessary to come out on top against that player. Next up, we have somebody running full Bull Goat, and this kind of immediately triggers bells in my mind, like, oh, maybe I should not use the power stance setup, because if they are running over 125 poise, I'm not going to poise break them with just a light attack from the single sword spear if it's power stance. So two-handing it is going to be a much better option because it is going to be a guaranteed poise break regardless of my opponent's armor. So we can see that kind of adjustment there. We're definitely trying not to get bled. Getting bled by the warped axe is going to be a massive problem, so we're continuing to use boluses, kind of taking advantage of the space in the arena and backing off and trying not to get caught too much in their Ash of War. But we do finally kind of get the necessary quickness of the final attack to come out with the W. And here we have a player running the Shamshir and also some green hair. Their name is Billie Eilish, and I kind of just thought that was funny. That was mostly the reason I put this in the showcase. I do like to see kind of an original either cosplay or just kind of funnier build. So nothing like crazy to note about this particular duel. We do get a jumping light attack that catches their roll, but a very funny build and just kind of made me chuckle, so I thought I'd put it in. And next up we have a player that is a little bit of a menace with their playstyle. So if you haven't seen my channel before, I'm not a huge fan of the Erdtree heal in duels, and I think we will be catching that in this particular invasion. We do get hit by lightning that does quite a bit of our health pretty early on. We're kind of on the back foot from the start of this invasion. We do see some Sacred Blade coming out, which is going to be a pretty strong Ash of War and kind of a good pressuring tool from range. And we're really just trying not to get caught by too many of their attacks and come in with surprising attacks. So here we don't get the Piercing Fang attack. We do get the jumping attack, which does quite a bit of damage, and they go for some Thunderbolt attacks. We're really trying to pay attention to, you know, how much health we have and dodge that incoming damage, so we're playing a little bit more passively, and they go for Erdtree heal. We get one jumping attack and follow it up with the second jumping attack. So, you know, two jumping L1s is going to be enough to kind of come out with the W against Erdtree heal. Next up, we have a player running a couple different mage setups, so we'll be seeing Moonveil as well as Phalanx, and those can be very strong pressuring tools. As always, I will recommend being very patient against these types of setups. They have a lot of priority if they have full FP, and the potential to get hit with Phalanx and then get hit with Moonblade while you're stun locked is going to be a very big problem. So it's really helpful to kind of wait for the opportune moment and then begin really pressuring, looking out for those Moonveil attacks, which, you know, don't come out quite as fast as a running light attack, is going to be helpful. And we really just keep the pressure up, go for Piercing Fang, and then we're able to trade with the Swift Glintstone Shard with just a neutral light attack and come out with the W there. So a very potentially dangerous build that we can kind of combat with patient play followed up by very aggressive play. So next up we have a player that's running a pretty cool setup. They have a main hand curved greatsword as well as an offhand commander standard. So I haven't seen this too often, but I really like, you know, mix up like this. I feel like curved greatsword with main hand, you know, halberds are really just offhand or main hand weapons that are kind of unique, have been more prevalent, and I do love to see that. And that's going to be the final duel of the showcase. As always, if you made it this far, I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate all the support, and if you have any recommendations for future builds, definitely let me know. I've been having a ton of fun with these power stance halberds, and yeah, that's all I've got, so I hope you have a good one.